Neil Diamond is the president of the South African Chamber of Commerce in the US. Thank you so much for your time, Neil. We are looking at the situation over the last 10 days between South Africa and the United States, really escalating to the point that it looks as though it's getting out of control. And perhaps the perception is now running ahead of the reality. In a letter that has been received or has surfaced from 4 members of Congress, this is apparently encouraging President Trump to cut diplomatic ties with South Africa and further to perhaps exit South Africa from AGOA. Can we take a step back? And do you have any visibility on the letter? Can you give us any detail?
Yes, thank you, Bronwyn, and hello to all your listeners and viewers. From the South African Chamber of Commerce side, we've kind of found ourselves in an uncomfortable position in this whole event. It's our responsibility to share information with our members that would assist them in navigating the economic realities between South Africa and the US. We have seen this letter that was written on February the 11th by 4 prominent members of Congress. This included some of the more senior members of Congress that have had South Africa on their radar for a while. And it basically urges the White House, specifically President Trump, to review the relationship with South Africa with a focus of removing South Africa in AGOA and using very firm language in as far as that South Africa does not qualify to continue as a participant in AGOA. There are a lot of peripheral political issues that have been referenced in the letter as well that I don't necessarily want to get involved in, but I think the impact on business is severe. And at this stage, it's getting to a new low in the overall relationship. But the amount of voices on the periphery that is starting to participate in the discussion really makes this a group chat in opposed to a two-way discussion between our nation's leaders that we as the Chamber have been calling for and have been requesting the South African government to reach out to the US. That has happened, but it seems like there's a bit of a cold shoulder from the White House in responding to the request of the South African government.
And that's what we've heard on the ground, is that the meeting requests have actually not met favorably and have not come to fruition with President Trump. Can you confirm that?
Well, our information is at this stage that a lot is happening in the Trump administration in as far as the global relationship of the U.S. with various partners. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been traveling the Gulf, visiting various Arab nations. So I don't necessarily think it's a matter of not responding to South Africa. It's rather a matter of South Africa not really being as high on the agenda as we would have liked to see. President Trump this week announced the fair trade and tariff regulations, where he's imposing the same tariffs that nations impose on the US, reciprocating on those tariffs. We've seen action being taken at NATO this week, where the US just said we cannot carry the defense budget of NATO any longer. European nations need to step up to the plate. Very much aligned to the narrative that we saw with African nations, where the US said USAID and Prosper Africa cannot continue carrying African nations and all their needs and wants. It's unfortunate, and it left a gaping hole in many countries in the delivery of certain much-needed services. But at the same time, we need to respect that the US president acts in the interest of the United States, and that is what the US president has done in this case. Has it affected South Africa? Absolutely. But we need to continue pushing to at least ensure that there's some dialogue, a continuation of dialogue. And what we are hearing out of all the other voices is not assisting us.
Where to from here, Neil? I mean, can we walk back the situation?
I think any relationship can be repaired. Every single day in the globe, there are diplomatic crises. And for those of us that enjoyed the TV series Madam Secretary, that was one drama after the next every single episode. So it gives you an insight into what kind of global drama unfolds on a daily basis. For us, we see the South African scenario very serious. It's on top of our agenda. It's something we talk about. It's something that our members want more information about. But I think for the US, South Africa is just one of the host of countries that they have identified where the relationship is not where they would fully like it to be. And in that basis, the Chamber has continually encouraged our Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lamola, and our President to reach out to the White House. And we've got full confidence that if a discussion takes place between those leaders, between Ronald Lamola and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and between Cyril Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump, that they could smooth things over. South Africa cannot afford to be excluded out of AGOA. But all these other voices, both on the South African side and on the US side, is not contributing to the solution.
I have reached out repeatedly to the Minister of Trade and Industry in South Africa, Parks Tau, but they have told me categorically that there is no new information with regards to AGOA. Perhaps I could get your perspective on what it would mean for South Africa if we did exit AGOA, if we were forced to exit AGOA. What would it mean for the economy?
So, Bronwyn, firstly, I'd like to say that we've got a lot of confidence in Minister Parks Tau. He's been a breath of fresh air in the economic cluster and has done a lot in the first 6 months being minister in the US-South Africa relationship. What has happened now has just been out of everybody's control. So let's just unpack AGOA. The Chamber was one of more than 50 organizations that made representation to Congress in 2023 to ensure continuation and inclusion of South Africa in AGOA, which already in 2023 was discussed whether South Africa is actually still eligible to be part of AGOA. But AGOA is not a bilateral trade agreement. It is a legislative framework in which African nations specifically can enjoy tariff-free exports to the United States in giving them a trade benefit that other nations may not have. And South Africa, more than any other African country, has made exceptional use of this. If we exclude energy and oil and gas from AGOA, South Africa is the largest beneficiary of AGOA as far as manufacturing is concerned. NAMASA, the National Motor Manufacturers Association, dealing with all the car manufacturers in South Africa, estimate that a total of 80,000 jobs currently are sustained through the AGOA trade framework. South African components for automobiles, leather seats, and then related industries. The aeronautical industry, components for Boeing is manufactured by a South African company. A lot of nautical boat equipment are manufactured by South African companies. And then we've got a host of small and medium enterprises that also manufacturing a host of goods under the AGOA. Now, the total impact of AGOA could be a loss of anywhere between 3 to 3.5 billion US dollars in annual exports for South Africa. We don't estimate that 80,000 jobs would go lost in the auto sector, but our own estimate is that at least 50,000 jobs would hang in the balance should we lose our participation in AGOA. The Reserve Bank estimated our economic growth for 2025 to be at 1.8%. In the eventuality that we do lose AGOA and the benefits of AGOA, there's no way we will have 1.8% growth. In actual fact, we could have a negative growth or even a recession in South Africa. I think the rand dollar would be adversely affected on that as well. We are very glad to see that the rand dollar has not had the full impact, showing that investors have got a level of confidence in our respective leaders to resolve issues. But this would have a huge financial impact and economic impact for South Africa.
I also want to get your perspective on what cutting diplomatic ties with South Africa would mean if that scenario did pan out.
I sincerely believe that that is not an option. The letter that was sent by 4 prominent members of Congress definitely alludes to that or makes inferences of that. But the US has been an historic ally of South Africa. We are by far the largest trading partner of the United States in Africa, and the US is South Africa's second largest trading partner globally. Since 2021, we are also the biggest destination for US tourists, making US number one in tourism for South Africa. So it wouldn't serve either nation if we cut diplomatic ties. But what we have seen with President Trump is that he pushes those boundaries. There's actually nothing that President Trump does that wouldn't surprise us. I think what we'd like to call is maybe just let's turn down the heat a little bit. And this is not just a call on government, our government in South Africa and our government in the United States. This is also a call to turn down the heat in our broader public, because the executive order and the current debate and discussions have opened up very deep and divided rifts within the society in South Africa. Racial relations have plummeted to an all-time low, maybe to the point even before we were in 1994. So what we'd like to do as the Chamber is encourage people to exercise tolerance, patience. Let's turn down the heat a little bit. Let's have a little bit more respect and encouragement for one another, and a bit of positivity. Let's believe and rely on our leadership to resolve this matter, because in the absence of that, South Africa is both internally and externally heading over a cliff. And there's in nobody's interest to see that happening to South Africa.
So, Neil, I hear you, the call to turn down the heat and perhaps walk back this current scenario. And that's going to happen between our leaders, right? The respective US and South African leaders. There is one other element that is doing the rounds, and I'm not sure whether you want to comment on it, but that is South Africa's relationship with Iran. And that this is, it's not just about expropriation without compensation. It is about Iran and the fact that South Africa has, well, the ANC has had close ties with Iran for many, many years. And then, of course, they are pursuing the genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. We've heard our foreign minister repeat those sentiments and say that South Africa is not backing down, can't back down from that genocide case against Israel, and Israel being an ally of the US. Where do you stand if you are prepared to comment on that?
From business side, we don't necessarily want to overreach into the political space. South Africa is a sovereign nation, and it is in their geopolitical interest to maintain relations globally, both that they've had historically and also new relationships that they embark and engage in as such. That may not necessarily align with the US's geopolitical strategy at this stage. And I think we're seeing kind of a crossroads that have emerged out of those two. But for business to start discussing the relations with governments and third parties would just be unfortunate. We want to stay in our lane. We want to continue to encourage our government to engage in discussion and dialogue with the US, and at the same time encourage the US to allow enough space for South Africa to maintain what they believe to be the right international relations. And look at the points that draw us together rather than those that divide us. Ultimately, we're looking at the economics of this, and it's in neither country's best interest to be in the place where we are at the moment.
Neil, thank you so much. I really appreciate you talking to us here on BizNews, and we'll obviously reach out as the story unfolds, hopefully as the story eases. Let's say Neil Diamond is the president of the South African Chamber of Commerce in the US. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bronwyn.